Excellent. Sorry, need a little guidance there. Okay, and so this is the database we've been creating. This is one of the tax sales that was filed in 2020. And so I think we had said before we didn't get the information from what we call the Exhibit A. And so Exhibit A had information from every parcel that was included in the tax sale filing. And so we've gone through, I'm actually going to switch which one we're looking at. This is my newer one. So this one should be a little bit more complete. Okay. And so every single parcel has information on the address, parcel number, whether or not it was redeemed. And so for our purposes, if it's redeemed, I've just noted the parcel number and that redemption. If it wasn't, I've noted the approximate address, which is listed in the court filings, delinquent years, tax and interest owed, owner information, and then I go over into the information from the Exhibit D, which is the case information we hoped to be able to have. So we can see the general tax total, interest and penalty, total of those two numbers, and then the sales price. And so then the county has a formula that they use to allocate the cost of that sale between the parcels that are sold. And so that is all included in those physical, or in the Exhibit D documents. And so they will divide the number of parcels. In this situation, it was 19, and the total sale price, and figure out how much should be assessed to each parcel for the cost of the sale. Not every property clears that number in terms of its sale value. And so they take the remnant and they do it again. And the full Exhibit Ds actually include 5 rounds of this process. I have only gone out to the 4th round because by then everything was figured out. And so then that balance is dispersed between the governing entities, and then anything, once the taxes and interest have been paid back, would go back to the parties whose property was sold based on their interest in that sale or in that property. And so what we found particularly valuable about this was the ability to look and see how many of these properties cleared the tax and interest that were owed, and which ones had losses. And what we're finding in early analysis, I've only done a couple of the Exhibit Ds, is that a lot of the properties with substantial losses are really in the target area that we're looking at, which reinforces some of our original hypothesis that the land bank is a great opportunity to intervene in some of these cycles. If we can work to take those properties into the land bank, many of them, part of the reason the totals are so high on the delinquent taxes is because of abatements or demolitions or other things that were the same funding source as what the land bank is funded out of. So I'm going to scroll down and actually I'm going to sort these out so we will only see the ones that did not fully repay the tax and interest that were owed. Or I'm sorry, so we'll only see the ones that sold. That's okay. And this will give us a better sense of what we're looking at with some of this. And so our hope is that once we have all the samples input, we'll be able to really do quite a bit of pinpointing, mapping to see where are we seeing that tax sale is not a sufficient solution for what it is that we're trying to do. So for example, this property has $5,000 and change in delinquent taxes as well as penalties beyond what the tax sale price was able to cover. And so total loss almost $11,000 on this property. Others are smaller amounts, probably parcels that had very little value to begin with. So we're really digging into some of these higher dollar ones to understand where are they and what it is that we might be able to do to assist in this process. And so at this point, this is an incomplete instrument, but we did want to go ahead and show you a preview. It may take a few months to build out because at this point we are manually retyping a lot of the data. And so once we get those plugged in and further analyzed, we'll bring additional research back to this group. Any questions?
Just as an example, is that 2018? What year was that? I'm sorry.
Let's see, this one would have been filed in 2020.
2020. So out of how many properties that went through tax foreclosure, how many of them were losses? Can you say?
Let's see. Probably do a really quick count right there. Very few, actually. I believe that 19 that we're seeing on the screen is actually the total of all the properties that sold. And so again, very few losses. I think this other one had a few more. It appears that maybe there were 2 filings in this year, and so one kind of was a heavier caseload than the other.
I guess it's somewhere between 5 and 7% of the properties are losses. This is a
Or what we saw this year for the tax zone. Out of the 6112.
When do you anticipate having all that data? I think that's going to be interesting to review. You think you'll have that done by next meeting?
No, and it's pretty labor intensive. I would expect we'll have a little bit more, and I am starting most recent backwards. So we'll have a little bit more of a sample hopefully next month. I anticipate that just between other staff tasks, it may take 2 or 3 months to get it fully completed.
It'd be interesting to go ahead and try to get the latest tax done, just to look at that information, most current.
Yes.
And then, the other question we had is how many of these properties are coming back for a second time, and we can look at that information we get later on. But I'd love to see the information for this last year.
Absolutely.
Next meeting, good.
And so the Exhibit D information is a little less time intensive to put in, so it may be that we can go ahead and do those. The other information that shows all of the parcels and properties that were in the tax sale actually comes from the Exhibit A. And that one just takes a little bit more time, less data going in, but more entries. And so it may be that we can push that D data forward a little bit faster and come back in and do the A that will show us those parcels that have come into the tax sale process and those that have gone through tax sale a little bit later on.
Thank you. I mean, that's a lot of information that's, I can tell, very time consuming.
Quick question, or maybe not a quick question. I'm wondering what we might learn from looking at the owner addresses of these delinquent properties. It appears that the owner addresses are in different areas than perhaps the actual property.
You are correct on that. I'm showing on the spreadsheet. I have taken a guess based on the owner address versus the property address. These are just my guesses as to whether the owner is the likely occupant. And so initial analysis would say that most of these are probably not owner occupied.
Yeah.
I would venture to guess if they're in our target area, they're even more likely to be investment properties as opposed to owner-occupied.
Very likely. And so as you all have additional thoughts on this, I know this is the first time that we're presenting it, but having seen the information that we're putting together, if you have questions that you would be interested in us analyzing as part of the research, then please reach out to me and let me know.
Well, Logan, we had a lunch today with Sedgwick County, and let Logan sort of bring you up to date on what our discussion was and maybe our next step.
Sure. So yeah, we had lunch this afternoon with the county treasurer, Brandy Bailey, and the deputy county treasurer, Jeremy Gibbs, as well as Troy Anderson from our economic development department, the assistant city manager, and then the economic development person for the county, whose name is escaping me.
Brent Sheldon.
Brent Sheldon. Myself and Gary had lunch this afternoon just to talk a little bit more for our own edification about the tax sale process as a whole. We talked about the mission of the land bank and why, while the land bank and the county have similar goals with our processes to get properties back on the tax rolls, we talked about the ways in which the land bank can be a little bit more intentional about turning properties around for productive use. We talked about the meeting that we had in August, and this was a nice follow-up to that meeting. I think at our meeting in August, they were in the throes of getting ready for the tax sale. Nothing could really change ahead of that upcoming year's tax sale at that point. But it gave us an opportunity to kind of state what we were looking for, talk about what other communities did. And this meeting was a really good opportunity for us to follow back up. They do seem somewhat interested in continuing the conversation. I would say very interested in continuing the conversation related to possibly setting the base bid at the tax sale of some properties at the amount of taxes due, whether that be the total amount of taxes in arrears or possibly the ones that have CDBG demolition charges, possibly setting the base bid at least what those CDBG amounts are in order to give us an opportunity to possibly have those properties left over afterward, in which case then we could have a conversation of what a transfer from the county to the land bank could look like. They talked about their struggles they understand that some of these properties are tiny little slivers of properties that really are not developable, and people will come in and purchase them thinking, oh, I'm going to go buy a property at tax sale, and they realize, oh, I can't do anything with this, 30-foot, 3 feet wide piece of property. But we talked about the ways in which, if those parcels could be transferred to the land bank, we might be able to have those conversations to start talking about side lot disposition to get some of those things back on the tax rolls. So action items from the conversation, we're going to be comparing calendars of city legal and county legal, and then the same group will get back together here probably either, I would say maybe late next week or not the following week, but the week afterwards. If any of you guys would like to be involved, board members are talking to you in that discussion, please let me know so that we can get you involved in the comparing of calendars. I think we will plan to have that meeting here, but overall, I think we've had KMUW kind of interested in talking to various entities. So the county's saying the city's not going to get special treatment. The city's saying we just want to figure out a way to work and make this work for everybody. And so this was a really good opportunity for us to come back together and align what our goals are in order to hopefully make some changes moving forward. Another thing, so I feel like the meeting went very well. Gary, you can share what your thoughts were as well. But another thing that came out of this meeting, which just escaped me, they are shooting for another tax sale in late August, early September. So we do have some time before then to hopefully, if we do have properties that still go unredeemed throughout the process that we might be interested in, specifically properties that might have CDBG investment, we can continue to have those conversations moving forward and hopefully form some type of a pipeline for the land bank to get properties out of the tax sale.
One thing I thought was very interesting is they said, like property that we had demolition costs, let's say it was $8,000. Well, it'd go to this tax sale for whatever the back tax plus the $8,000. And that is the demolition cost was sort of a special assessment tax the city put on the property because of the cost. Well, let's say the total of all those taxes, $10,000. I could come in and buy it for $100 and those taxes would all go away. Well, but if you have a a new development that has special assessment taxes on, those specials are spread out over 15 years. The only taxes that go away are the delinquent taxes. So whoever's buying the property then has the taxes going forward. So one of the questions we asked was, well, maybe instead of the city putting a $10,000 or $8,000 expense for demolition, they ought to spread it out over a period of years. So then if there's delinquent taxes, it'll only be that year's segment of those delinquent taxes be given. And that way, some of the CDBG money can be recouped. So, you know, there's different ways to look at this. And to be honest, the county didn't really have a problem with that if we could legally spread it over a period.
You wanted to assess the new buyer with the 8,000 for the demolition for the property they're buying.
What you're doing is you're just having that go forward, yes. And granted, chances are, Jerome, somebody's gonna say, well, I don't wanna buy it. Well, but at least the city doesn't get stuck with it. And the land bank might have the opportunity to go to the new buyer and say, okay, we'll waive these, but a condition of the deed is you need to start construction in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
You know, let's put some restrictions on that to where you're gonna build a single family home or whatever, so that at least we're getting it turned back into profit.
Is that deed, when they get that sheriff's deed though, is that a state deal? Or they issue that for the lien release?
I don't have any details.
We don't bill like that right now for CDBG.
Yeah.
It would work however, like if there was a new development and there were special assessments placed on, you know, it's over a period of time. So we'd have to actually have conversations here to see if one, that's applicable and can actually be done with CDBG dollars. But two, it wouldn't necessarily be like the new owner's on the hook for all of the demolition costs. It would just be whatever hasn't already been forgiven, however many years are left. The same way that if there were lighting assessments or infrastructure assessments billed in the future, the county can't get rid of those moving forward. That was one thing we hadn't thought of and actually came from the county's economic development person to challenge us to think about, well, maybe there's a different way we could bill for those things moving forward so that we're not seeing a total loss on CDBG demo costs.
So I think it's very good discussion today. I think it opens the opportunity up to let legal sit down and figure out what the statute allows. And then we'll take next steps.
Thank you. And speaking of those parcels that are coming up on the next tax sale, at this time, there are 234 parcels unredeemed in Wichita. This says as of the January 6th report, but I actually got a report today that confirms that's still accurate. And I believe I said 19 in the focus area. As of the last meeting, that was 20. One of those has been redeemed, and so we celebrate that. Going into other parcels that we had discussed last meeting, the parcel in the 1200 block of North Hoover, we had reviewed. It was a city surplus property where there was active developer interest. And what we found in initial review was that its proximity to I-235 was going to require environmental remediation for CDBG project eligibility. Noise levels were high enough that additional soundproofing walls were going to be required. And so we had sent that back. The request came through the real estate office. And so real estate has reached back out to that potential developer to get a little bit more information. And I'm looking at Jerry. Okay.
Great.
In that conversation, the developer expressed concern regarding the cost and the restrictions if the property were to go through the land. The reason is that the land bank is predominantly funded by community development block grant funds. And so funds used that way must tie to an eligible outcome. And so it would require the remediation, whereas private development not through the land bank would not require those extras. And so at this time, staff do recommend withdrawing that parcel from land bank consideration. So.
Well, I mean, you take a motion, do we need to, I mean, if it doesn't make sense for the developer, why would we stand in the way of the developer, I question.
What is this parcel?
It was too small, wasn't it, the parcel?
It's right at,
I mean, the parcel was small though. It's like,
parcel was a small piece on the end of a street, 235, and you know where the new bridge is, about 13th Street comes across?
Yeah.
This is just to the east of the north side of that bridge. And it was an odd piece that didn't have utilities to it.
It was loud.
East side of 235?
It's just on the east side of 235. There's a church right in there, and this was the end of a residential street that really,
no, if it would already work there, somebody already would have bought it.
yeah. I mean, and the challenge I see is if CDBG money, I mean, you know, if we can transfer that to them without an environmental study back to them. So.
And I think it's important to note that the CDBG restrictions or environmental remediations are intended to protect vulnerable populations. There is a good reason for them and why they're required within builds that are funded by federal dollars. But certainly we don't want to have land bank processes prevent a parcel from being able to be developed within the private market.
I want to make sure I'm understanding what the rub is. If this property goes directly to the developer without coming through the land bank, they are not responsible for the environmental remediation. But if they go through the land bank, they are required to meet environmental remediation?
That is correct.
Due to the land bank's funding source of CDBG at this time, if we had non-restricted funds, then there is a chance we could run this property through the land bank using those funds to help us keep the property up in the interim. And if there was any title work needed, we could then pay for that out of like unrestricted funds. I don't believe there would be any needed because this is a city-owned property right now. But yes, because our funding source is CDBG, we have to make sure we're staying in compliance with CDBG regulations, one of which being environmental. We have to conduct an environmental review. Due to the location, the road noise, and probably the highway too, I would think, there's sound decibel levels in excess of what is allowable. And so that would increase the amount of probably insulation that would have to go into the building as well, which would increase cost for the developer. So at this time, it makes more sense to just have the property be sold through the real estate office instead of the land bank.
The benefit of going through the land bank is
It's limitations.
Right. It would allow us to test our processes. It would get us a CDBG eligible outcome. It would, allow for us to have performance measures through U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. But for this one, there's just too many roadblocks at this point. There's too much road noise.
So I'm just, again, clarifying. So there's not that there's an environmental area that needs to be remediated. It's that we would be required to do an environmental study.
Yes, we would have to do an environmental review. And that environmental review would say that if it was just built as is without any sound remediation, that the sound decibel levels would be in excess of what is allowable by HUD.
Gotcha. Thank you for that extra clarification.
Yeah, no problem.
So do we have a consensus to withdraw or do we need a vote?
I don't think that we need to vote. If it had been one where you had voted to take action prior, then you might need to vote again. But I think we're okay to just take this one off of the agenda moving forward.
totally agree.
Okay, thank you. We also were, I believe, again, real estate office was approached about a potential donation for the land bank. The property is at 1110 South Hiram. This vacant lot is currently for sale on the open market. And the land bank has been approached about it as a potential donation. It's our understanding that this property does have some title issues. And so a quiet title action would be necessary for the site to be marketable. At this time, the cost and the time to clear the title is unknown. And so we have not yet embarked on any significant title research or anything that would cost. Both real estate and our staff analysis show that the parcel size could pose some challenges for development. Now, real estate found that the developer could apply for a parcel-specific administrative adjustment, and it could be adequate for a single-family residence, but that would not be known until that application was actually submitted. And I'm going to go to the next slide, which has a photo that one of our staff members took, as well as the map. And so really what we're seeing is that this is a long and narrow parcel. This for sale sign is kind of in the middle of it, and it is right along the road, a couple of more traditionally sized parcels on either side of it. And so while it could be buildable, it is very small. There also could be potential for something such as a side lot disposal. And so staff has not yet researched whether any surrounding property owners would be interested, but we did want to bring it to the board to seek your guidance on next steps.
Any idea who owns the property?
It's in private ownership.
It's in what?
It is in private ownership of an individual.
It doesn't have adjoining property or anything?
That's correct. He's not an adjoining. It's standalone lot.
Beth, can you speak to anything related to the quiet title action, what you think might be necessary, as well as the cost? I think you're with us online.
Yes, it costs about $180 to file the lawsuit. We'd have to pull title. Before we do that, the action itself could take, they run anywhere between 6 months and a year, depending on what happens. We would also probably have some publication costs, which would be another $200 to $300 to publish for anybody that might have an interest in it. I don't remember, is this the one that there's potentially spousal interest, John, that might be looming out there?
Yes.
Okay. So what we have is individuals that are in the chain of title, and there's no mention whether there's a spousal interest or not. So we would have to, try to go back and find them and or publish to see what we can come up with. So total cost, $750, and that's, I'm not trying to be cheap. I'm just trying to be maybe overstating it a little bit.
Jeff, what's the benefit for them to donate this to the land bank? Is there a tax benefit to do that, or is it just?
Well, I mean, we're not ever saying whether there's a tax benefit to the individual or not. I mean, if there's a problem that if they donate it and we are able to turn it within I think it's a 5-year period, they may have to undo that benefit that they have. Just getting it off their hands could be a one reason, not having to pay taxes on it, some other factors like that, or just philanthropic nature of saying, I'd like to give this to the land bank.
That would be the main advantage to them, is just getting rid of the maintenance taxes. I would,
Yeah.
unless legal says something different, that if somebody brings in the IRS form that we sign, as we're accepting the donation, it's going to be public purpose that we not sign.
Yeah, it's really not public.
You're supposed to hold for 5 years, and we have no intention of holding 5.
Right.
Joe, this lot is about 3,200 square feet. It's got a 20-foot setback. It's not really built.
Yeah.
It's just, it is zone multifamily, but can't be done. It's just too much. Now, I do show that the people behind it own both lots, and then the rest of the block is owned by the same address on the tax rolls, except for the last parcel. They own the next 5
Our address, one on Irving.
Yeah. They own the next 4 or 5 properties there, so those are probably the best candidates for approaching both of those people to buy that, I would think. But if it's on the open market, maybe they already tried, I don't know.
That's my next question is, okay, so we have the opportunity to get this as a donation. When do we have the opportunity to contact the adjacent landowners to see if they're interested in either buying or having us give it to them?
So our policies allow us to try and identify an end use for a property prior to even bringing it on. So I think we could have conversations with the surrounding neighborhood at present, just making very clear that the land bank does not own this property right now. It's been proposed as a potential donation. If we were to acquire it, would you be interested in keeping it as like a community garden, or could we dispose of this through the side lot disposition program, things like that. Depending on I would have to look at the area, see if it was in like a qualified census tract. If it was going to be maintained as like a community park, we could possibly utilize CDBG funds for it. If we were going to dispose of it through side lot disposition, I don't think we would be able to do the CDBG route. So we might be able to tap into our very limited pool of general funds, but it's all going to depend on what the neighbors want to do with the property. So we could start having those conversations if you'd like before making a recommendation either way.
Can I raise the issue of whether this is something we really should be doing for side lot distribution? Or, it's an odd shaped lot, but the taxes are paid. We're not able to put this back on the payroll, and it's not a distressed property or anything at this point. It's just a poorly shaped lot that they know they're going to have a hard time selling. So it's an easy way to try to get some benefit by giving it to the land bank. But is it our responsibility to take this kind of a property on?
This is not really in what I consider our target area.
No, it's not. They are behind on taxes though.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think they're only like 1 year or one payment behind, but I think
Yeah. But I'm not trying to put a wet blanket on something, but I'm just wanting to make sure that this is the scope of the type of property we're looking for.
So
we wouldn't accept the property into the land bank if we didn't identify an end use prior to going through
Right.
the title action and the costs associated with that.
So just for
But we'd
clarification,
have to get something from the side property owners to cover our costs, or otherwise we're just clearing title for somebody. So
Yeah.
Exactly, Jeff. I agree 100%.
so if somebody donates to the land bank, they can't use it as a deduction unless the land bank uses that property for public purposes. Did I understand you correct?
5 years, right?
5 years. So there's no advantage. So nobody can really donate anything and get a tax write-off on it.
No, I don't believe so. Unless the land bank, there is interest and we have been approached. We're still trying to schedule a time for them to come to one of these meetings by the Sustainability Board through Public Works and Utilities. They're interested in possibly having the land bank as a mechanism to protect green space, such as community gardens, things like that. If we were to acquire property and transfer it to the park department for green space, then we might be able to offer a tax write-off.
Green space, but that's, once again, it's public use, so that's falls within that.
We wouldn't get back on the tax rolls, no, if it stayed in the possession of the city.
The other advantage to the property owner, one advantage would be the forgiveness of past due taxes. They send us something that's got past due taxes, we take it, we can write the taxes off. And then
So-
the advantage of giving it to the land bank instead of just giving it to the city as a whole. If we wanted a parcel, they donate it to us now. We take it, but we have to deal with those taxes on the day we accept ownership back. Whereas the land bank, they donate it. The land bank can go back and clear it.
Now, I guess let's not forget that we could, for some people, it might be an avenue to get rid of it is to donate it. So maybe they could donate it to Mennonite Housing. And so let's not just stop here because we can't do it. If we can find them another lane for them to switch into to give it to Mennonite Housing or another nonprofit organization that could get that back on.
I don't think we take the lot. That's my advice.
I think if we do anything, we go to the adjacent landowner and tell them we're thinking about taking it back and we're going to turn it into a community garden. We'll see how fast he gets his checkbook out.
Yeah.
Right now, they're asking $4,900 for this parcel that's online. It's a little bit more than $100 a square foot.
Might not be the best property, but we definitely have a responsibility to bring all potential donations forward. So at this point, it's up to you all as to provide direction to staff so they can know how to move forward, or we can just go case closed on this one.
I make a motion that we do not accept this donation and that we don't spend any more time on it because it's not located in what I'd consider a target area. And I do not see that it has potential for low income or affordable housing, which is something that we're very interested in. And it's really not a buildable lot. So that's my motion. If I have a second.
Second it.
Jerome, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
On the 13th Street City Surplus Properties, staff has not yet initiated the additional research to try to identify adjacent landowners, things like that yet. It is our intention to continue to do so in the coming months. I think we may have one potential update, but I'm not sure. Not yet, okay. And so we should have more for you in coming months on that. Additionally, I think Logan had reached out on MABCD condemnations to understand at what point in that process we would receive notification that a property was in that condemnation process.
So we reached out to Caitlin with MABCD because as we mentioned in the meeting before, we do receive requests for environmental reviews for the demolition. And so my question to her was, when we received that request from MABCD to do the environmental review, is that pre or post the determination that's made by City Council to say, yes, this property is coming down? So what she told me was, it is post Board of Code Standards and Appeals decision that the property needs to come down, but pre-City Council determination. So with that being said, it would be advantageous of us to reach out to Caitlin for additional information regarding each of those properties as the environmental review request comes in, to say, do you have an owner that you actually can get in touch with? Do you think this could be a good opportunity for the land bank to pursue? And she's noted that she would be letting us know yes or no. She says most of them that come through, they're with owners that they can't get in touch with or that have passed away, and there's multiple heirs. And so there could be significant title issues with a lot of these properties. She said sometimes there could be instances where it would be advantageous for the land bank to move forward with those. And so we'll continue to reach out to her on all properties that we receive environmental review requests for the demolition for, in order to determine if any of those would be viable land bank properties or would be worth our time to try and reach out to the owner and see whether or not, because it does sound like there is time between when that request is made and then the final council determination is made for the house to come down. So they do have a lot of properties in the pipeline that will be coming to council for consideration. And so we do have some opportunity that we can continue to work through the process on those properties before they're approved for demolition. She said,
Logan, this is Jeff. I'm sorry, I was going to say, I get the title work from each one of those before they go over to Board of Code Standards and Appeals. I
Right.
have the last couple rounds, I'll get 9 or 10 at a time. Last couple rounds, I have been kind of looking at it for that perspective. But what I'll do is when I get the list, I will forward that on to Sarah. And I can look to do a preliminary title review well before any of this takes place, before you get the environmental request. And if there's any properties that have any, all I can tell is from a title perspective, I don't have pictures or anything like that, but I can send the addresses on for consideration, and that'd give us a couple months head start from where we are now.
Perfect. That would be amazing, Jeff. Thank you so much.
On a similar note, one of the things that we are starting to do as staff is to try to create a resource that would allow us to evaluate title needs with a particular property, so that we can assess what types of properties do we feel like we can do the work that is necessary, which types of properties do we not. That is early in the process, but we hope to be able, as we would take in properties, to understand what will be required and which ones do we feel like we can adequately clear as we evaluate. So that brings us to other business and open discussion.
I'd encourage staff to look at, we were talking at lunch, sort of the target area, and areas we sort of identified as Minnesota, Pyatt, Ash, and Madison Street, maybe from 13th to 17th or something, sort of take a target area, try to identify what type of properties are in that area, maybe ownership, Sedgwick County map, and see, what the ownership is, and just to get an idea of what the demographics in these areas, where are the opportunities to make a difference for those communities, if there is opportunities. Because, the challenge I see is every property has a different story. And if we're going to try to do some things, as I mentioned before, this Garcia Construction Company that's building some, we need to get an idea what their goals, what their plans are. Maybe we need to talk to Habitat for Humanity, Mennonite Housing, and sort of see if this area is areas they're working in, and we can figure out how do we cooperate, coordinate with them to make it viable, make a difference.
Sure. Something we're doing, not related to the land bank, but we're evaluating the Affordable Housing Fund program because of new guidance from Treasury, is basically making it almost impossible for us to utilize any of those funds for affordable ownership, which is really discouraging to us because we want to make sure we're promoting neighborhoods and areas that have a healthy mix of renters and home ownership, because those are the healthiest neighborhoods. And so one thing we did, we had our first meeting, was it last week? Year's already gone, feels like so long. We had a meeting with all of our partners who've utilized home funds for affordable housing development in the past. We invited them to the table to talk about ways in which we might be able to update this plan, give them updates. And we do have a follow-up meeting scheduled for next week. So we could add this discussion to that and pose those questions to that group as well, in order to see if they have any feedback. I think we're going to get some positive response with the focus area we already have lined out, like what you said, from 9th to 17th, and then Grove to Hillside, with additional interest in the Minnesota Ash Pyatt area. And so we can bring that to them. But it was neat to see all of those players sit together, and one even remarked that, this is the first time they feel like they've actually been in the room with people who share their same goals. And so we're going to be having another follow-up meeting next week. And so that would be a good opportunity for us to continue to talk about that. But yeah, I think a good place to start with Gary's request would be looking at the vacant lot map and actually maybe picking a couple streets and just seeing who owns the properties. Are they owned by similar people? Are those people we could approach to say, hey, we have all these vacant lots in this area. Is there any interest in maybe not having all those and letting the land bank maybe step in? So yeah, we can definitely do that for next meeting.
And I think it might be advantageous, we just talked about when we had some of the property owners and owners together. Be interesting to maybe have one of us on this committee sit in on some of those meetings, just to hear the conversation. Just a thought.
Yeah, we can.
I really like that idea.
Yeah, if you're interested, we can invite, maybe we can do the land bank portion as the first part of our meeting next week. And we can send you guys the information if any of you guys would like to come about it.
Do we have any issues with open meetings? Having more?
If we have more than half of you here, yeah, we would have an issue. We'd have to post it, close meeting at this point.
That's my only thought. It's in the same way with our discussion with the county. I don't want to have it.
No, there wouldn't have been any issues with that.
That's what I'm saying. If we invite
Oh, I
this
see.
board, we don't want to have 6 people show up and all of a sudden we have
Right.
an issue there. So if let us know, and then if Logan, you or Sarah could keep track of who's coming or going so that we don't have an issue with an open meeting. But I think it'd be good for us to hear what are these other groups, what the other consideration thoughts are. How do we coordinate with them? Because we don't have what I consider a stick anywhere in this deal. I mean, we've got to work with people, and there's really no reason for them to work with us other than they want to move the same initiative that we have forward. So it's really.
Yeah, just follow up with that, you know, if there's vacant lots, even if there's something that's available for us, we can't really do anything because we don't have any money. We wanted to buy those lots and then coordinate something with Mennonite housing, or I'll just use them as an example. All we can do is look at it. And so back to your stick, there's so little that we can do. We can look at these 20 by 10 lots that you can't build them on, but if that's all we can.
You know, it's interesting.
Sure.
Our discussion with the county today is we were sort of talking about these pieces and parts like this last one we just looked at. And they said, well, we've been told by legal that we can't go out and solicit in any way, shape, or form to have somebody, a neighboring property owner acquire that. We'd be basically selling real estate, negotiated real estate. I thought that was interesting. We can, as a land bank. But I don't know whether we want to get in that business if we're not going to generate revenue or something that's going to benefit the land bank or the city of Wichita or Sedgwick County. So.
Well, with some of those vacant lots, I mean, there could be instances where it's an out-of-state owner. They are just constantly paying the last year of taxes to get it not to go to foreclosure. Maybe they just want to be done with it. So it could be worth looking into maybe a cross section of our focus area to see who owns these. Are they people in Wichita, especially with vacant lots, right? Because we know that the owner's not at least on the parcel. Do they have back taxes? And then trying to reach out to see, present the land bank as an opportunity to them. Transfer it into the land bank, your taxes go away. You don't have to deal with it anymore. You're not getting assessed for mowing charges if you're not keeping it up, things like that.
But can we get funds from somewhere to where we can, because if you're just asking people to give it to you, say, yeah, you can get rid of your taxes, but give it to me free. I don't know, really hasn't.
Pay for property. We can, it's just, I think we have to be careful. Deanna spoke to that at KHRC about the can of worms you're opening when you're approaching certain people to purchase their property. There could be issues with public perception and things like that, but there's nothing that stops us from actually paying for a parcel of land. No.
We don't have a budget for that.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can't make a habit of just buying. Yeah, I mean, we have like $370,000.
Is that CDBG?
CDBG, yes.
Okay.
So
We have cash to buy land.
We have some CDBG money, but understand that also it's like the Hoover property we were talking about. All of a sudden, okay, we're going to buy that property and turn it over to private ownership, but all of a sudden now we have all these rules and requirements. I mean, I think if we find that there's opportunities to do stuff like this, we ought to be asking the city for some other funds to utilize to help with the transfer.
I mean, unless it's a property that's prime real estate for one of our housing or nonprofit housing developers to come in and create affordable housing, because as soon as you create affordable housing, then the CDBG obligation has been met in addition to the other environmental concerns like that. But typically unless there's a groundwater plume or something underneath, typically in a residential area such as Rock the Block, we're already providing them, we're providing Habitat, for example, funds through our home program. We're having to do environmental reviews anyway. There aren't as many environmental challenges in a established area. The Hoover property was interesting just with its proximity to the road. But if we're talking about a residential infill, I mean, yes, there are hoops we have to jump through, and I agree. I mean, going to someone and saying, hey, give me your monopoly, I don't know how effective that would be, unless they just want to wash their hands of it or get rid of back taxes. But I mean, it's an avenue we can pursue.
I think it's a very good cause for affordable housing. I would encourage you to be more aggressive and less concerned about public opinion, trying to promote affordable housing. I think we tend to be a little bit too overcautious because of public perception, and there's nothing wrong with trying to get something, make something affordable so somebody can own their own home. And it takes that little extra effort, and I don't know if it's an attorney that's cautioning you so much on that, but great cause.
Anybody else have other items for business or open discussion?
Want to elect officers?
The only thing, if you actually looked at our bylaws, we do elect officers on an annual basis. And a little over a year since we elected officers, so I would propose that we do that, maybe not this meeting, but next meeting.
Did the bylaws say anything that can just repeat the same one? Is there any?
You can. I think we just need a motion to entertain that.
Look at me.
Is it, who is it all right now? It's you and myself?
I think that's it.
That's it.
We have a
The
chair.
chair position, Sarah serves as the other
I'll
outlined in our.
make a motion to keep it the same.
I'm okay to keep it the same if you are.
Why don't we make a
Somebody else has to make that motion, don't they? Or
Uh,
somebody have to make that motion?
So moved.
Rome, did you make the motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to keep the.
And I heard a second from Kay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Or make sure that gets in the minutes so we
Yes,
try to comply with whatever our bylaws say.
yes.
Or we don't get Jeff in an uproar on us. Okay.
I
anything else?
do want to mention, we have a report due to the city council sometime pretty soon. We're supposed to give annual reports to the city council.
I
And
can't hear you,
Sarah and I
Jeff.
can talk about that. I'm sorry, we have to give a,
I don't want to hear you, Jeff.
oh, okay,
Jeff and I will talk about what we need to do on the.
okay,
annual-
yes.
The annual report should be pretty easy, right?
Yeah. Sarah, why don't you and Jeff follow up on that? Figure out when that's going to be and what.
What's our report? What we accomplished?
It's going to be a short report.
Meeting adjourned?
Wait a minute. Where's Wes at? Is he part of this?
Yeah, I talked to Wes. I called him after our last meeting and I was under the impression he was going to be here today. I'll follow up with Wes again.
I thought he quit. I don't know.
He just apologized, said he had been sick and also been very busy, and
I hadn't seen them for a while.
so I
Seen them downtown or out the boulders either.
did not express desire to drop or anything. So I'll try to get a hold of him. If that's it, I move we adjourn. I have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next meeting, February 8th, 1:30, same location. Thank you very much, Sarah. Logan, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
And have a great